Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored this morning to have a tremendous privilege to introduce a longtime leader, a longtime innovator, and a longtime friend. Not only to FDIC and fire engineering, but a friend to every firefighter in America. He spent a lifetime tirelessly striving to try to improve our working conditions, our compensation, and our welfare. General President Schaitberger is the 9th president of the IAFF. He has served as the general president since 2000. He's a former Fairfax County, Virginia firefighter, and in 1976 he created the union's political and legislative programs. He's on the AFL-CIO Executive Committee and is the vice president of the AFL-CIO Executive Council. He's the chairman of the Board of Trustees for the IAFF Burn Foundation, and he's a board member of the IAFF Fallen Firefighters Memorial. It's one of the greatest pleasures of my life to having had the opportunity to know him, and it's a tremendous pleasure to welcome him back home again to FDIC. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming our friend, the IAFF General President, Harold Schaitberger.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Let me, Bobby, first of all, thank you for the opportunity and the invitation to, again, have a few moments this morning to address some of the very best across two great countries, the women and men that wear the uniform of our business, firefighters, emergency medical service workers, paramedics, those on the front line every day. And I appreciate, Bobby, the work of this great conference, the FDIC, and the instruction and the education that's brought forward so that our own can learn how to not only do their jobs more effectively, but hopefully how to do their jobs more safely and go home to their families after they pull their shifts. I also want to make sure that I acknowledge my great leadership that's here with me this morning. I'd like to thank Wayne Smith, the president of Indianapolis Local 416, for his friendship, leadership. Wayne, thank you so much. You're doing a great job for us. And I know my state president, Tom Hannafy, is at meetings this morning, or probably the real truth is that he just doesn't want to have to listen to another one of my remarks. But Tom's doing a fantastic job for all of our affiliates and our members across this great state of Indiana. And to my friend of almost 40 years, went on the Indianapolis Fire Department in 1968 after pulling 2 tours in Vietnam for his country. 24 years as a member of 416's executive board. 25 years running our state council here in Indiana, representing the interests of our members. And for the last 10 years, our international vice president for the 8th district, largest district in our international with 730 locals, who just a couple of months ago has now risen and has become, after the retirement of Vinnie Bolin, our General Secretary Treasurer, our new General Secretary Treasurer. And I am so proud. He's my friend. He's my brother. And we are blessed to have him as our new GST. Tommy Miller, great to see you as my brother. Well, I'm going to ask this. I'm just curious. Let me see a show of hands. I'd like to see just how many of this IAFF might be in this room this morning, knowing this is a broad fire service meeting and forum, but how many IAFF members do we have out there? All right, well, sisters and brothers, it's great to see you. And so if the fight starts, we'll know where to back each other up. Let me just start by saying that we're really meeting today, and you're meeting this week at a pretty difficult time in our country. These economic times and the crisis that we've all been experiencing over this last 22 months has really put our country in jeopardy, certainly exposed our communities. It's certainly been more than just some challenging times for our profession. And so I thought that my remarks this morning, hopefully, are what I like to normally be noted for, maybe not terribly eloquent, but I do like to be frank. And at least from my perspective, have a frank conversation this morning with you. We need to talk about the impact of this brutal recession on our ability to deliver our services. And there's a lot of us that have been around during tough economic times. I remember the 70s. Some of you might have been around long enough to remember that recession. That was a pretty tough one. I remember when 1,600 firefighters were laid off in New York City, including my own chief of staff, Pete Gorman. And I remember the recessions of the 80s. Early 80s was a pretty tough time for all of us. In the 90s, and the economic downturn following the horrific attacks on September 11, 2001. But this has been a time unlike anything this country has experienced since the Great Depression. We're talking about not only an economy that collapsed, but the financial markets that crashed. And foreclosures in the millions were not only personal tragedies, but certainly undermined the economic well-being of our state and community governments, while placing so many of you in more jeopardy with vacant buildings, too many of them lighting up, and forcing tax revenues to go lower and lower, meaning less funds to help ensure and resource the business that we're all in. And the banking system frozen may not affect some of us personally in some ways, but it affected all of us in important ways by running small business out of business, less jobs, less revenues. We've watched unemployment reach an incredible level of 15 million workers in this country out of work. Almost 8 million in just the last 20 months. Now, this is a pretty difficult time that we're all in, so we need to talk about the impact of this brutal recession on our members and on their lives and on their livelihoods. We need to talk about how we respond to the challenges that we face. And I can tell you that they are many. As I travel this country from coast to coast, and although that our incredible members all across Canada, thank God, are not quite experiencing yet, and hopefully will not, the economic crisis that we have below the 49th parallel, on those border cities, they too are beginning to feel some of the pain. And I've been to cities from the Gulf to the northern borders and beyond, and one thing has really been clear to me. It's open season on firefighters and paramedics everywhere. And if you don't believe me, just ask my members in Nevada, from Clark County to North Las Vegas to Reno and everywhere in between where I just left. If you don't believe me, just ask my members in Oklahoma. Ask them in Utah, and California, and Florida, Massachusetts, and Idaho. Ask the firefighters and those that hold the IAFF card in Lorain and Warren, Ohio, and Flint, Michigan, and Baltimore, and in Philadelphia. And ask them right here in Indiana, from Muncie, Gary, Anderson. And they'll tell you it's open season on the men and women of our proud profession that are on the front lines every day. Throughout our histories, our members have always had their admiration. You know your reputation in the general public arena. Reputation has been held high. When polled, the public has always said, you're the most trusted workforce. Simply put, it wasn't that long ago that firefighters were everybody's friends. Wasn't that long ago that those who jumped those rigs every day were, quite frankly, the darlings of the communities? Politicians, everyone wanted their photo taken with them, and they could do no wrong. We had some political support from all corners. This union of ours is bipartisan. We have a membership that are Republican, Democrat, and Independent, a membership that's moderate, conservative, and some progressive. And we have a membership that understands that those politicians believed in us. They believed in our mission. And in some ways, they may have felt they had no other choice. Now, they're ready to openly take us on. And it's certainly no surprise to us in this business that a heightened source of this goodwill and recognition of what we've been experiencing for decades, quite frankly, skyrocketed following that horrific day, September 11th, 2001. You know, I know, that the incredible work done that day during that horrible tragedy when America and the world witnessed the best of selflessness and bravery, commitment and courage. The goodwill that came out of the horrible sacrifice of 343 of our brothers with the FDNY, the loss that we experienced, the sacrifice they made. It stemmed from the incredible efforts of the recognition of the work that was done in New York at Ground Zero, at the Pentagon outside of Washington, D.C., and with so many others who answered the call that day. That's when an admiring public and people really understood how hard your jobs are, and the sacrifices that you are willing to make. But the truth is, things are very different today. In my view, the goodwill is beginning to evaporate. And where we could do no wrong just a few years ago, we now find ourselves on the defensive. Instead of smiling for the camera, we're running from it because reporters are chasing us down to ask us about the growing ill-placed impressions of the alleged inflated wages that our members are making. They're asking about those so-called Cadillac health care plans, about our over-generous, unsustainable retirement systems and benefits that we worked so hard for over the decades, willing to give up so much on the front end along the way to ensure that those in our business had sound benefit structures and a sound and good health care plan, and a retirement system that would allow them to enjoy their life after service to their community and know that it was secure. No, newspapers now are finding it a field day to attack us. It's on the front page of too many publications in too many communities. It's on the front page of the Barron's Report, for those of you who might have seen 2 issues ago. A front page, a firefighter laying on a chase lounge on a beach, inside cartoon playing golf, while the headline was, "Cities are going bankrupt because of these gold-plated retirement systems that firefighters are receiving." Public officials are accusing us too. You know why? Because it's easier. While they're struggling with diminishing revenues, they find it easier to blame us as opposed to coming clean that in most cases, when they want to point at our retirement systems with those huge unfunded liabilities and these benefits that we can no longer afford to give you, that the real problem is when they decided to take tax holidays. I love that, holidays they call them, simply meaning that they didn't pay their share into those systems over the years when the markets were running well and returns were running high. No, they simply weren't prepared to pay their fair share of the freight. So when the market crashed, they weren't going to take any responsibility for the hole they found themselves in. No, it was going to be to point to you that you're out of step with the rest of the world, that you're entitled and receiving retirement benefits that nobody else in other work sectors are allowed to receive. It's not enough that this economic crisis, which really bordered on a depression, has taken from us on the front lines, in too many cases, to the unemployment lines. And for so many of you who are still on the job, they're putting you on the firing line. And for those of you in command out here, you're being asked to do a lot more with a lot less. I know that. You're being required to make ends meet while elected officials slash your budgets. Your choice is often few. You're being pushed to close the gaps by shutting down companies, browning them out in a game of what I believe is nothing more than neighborhood Russian roulette. I'll tell you a brownout story that occurred just 2 weeks ago. And I was just in Baltimore at a station visit, which I love to do, over 400 of them in the last 10 years. A fire lit up across the street from here to the back of that room, the apartment building from the station. The ladder was in the house. The engine was on a run. Second due engine was on a run. Third due engine was browned out. First engine available was fourth in. Fires blowing out the windows. People are reported trapped. Truck company responds. Firefighters go in, make 2 great rescues. The place lights up. There's no water. They bail out a 3rd floor window. One of them hanging on for dear life on the ledge until the burns were so severe he finally had to let go, falling 3 stories on a concrete platform. Still in shock trauma today. Could that have been avoided? We'll never know. All I know is that an engine company that was closer and could have begun to back up that crew wasn't available because they shut it down to try to save a few bucks. Now, you're being pushed to reduce staffing levels, you in command. You're doing it by attrition. You feel you have no other choice. And yes, you're also looking at one of your own, which is one of our own. And too often in this last 16 months, handing them a pink slip. And it's not just about one of your own being walked off the job, hanging their turnouts up in the room. It's going home in shame and telling your family that you're out of work and you don't know what you're going to do. No, not only are we fighting for our jobs and defending our pensions and our benefits, we're also defending our reputations now from those who want to tarnish it. Let there be no doubt. This is a new time. We're in a new environment. And just last week, as I said, when I was in Las Vegas, Nevada, I had to wake up 2 mornings in a row, and on the front page of the local paper was the most recent attacks on our members. One about their wages, and one about how could they be collecting money for MDA on the clock. Now, you know what? It's a pretty sad state of affairs if we can't go out and do our charitable work and raise the money, some $27 million last year, for those that are stricken with these horrible diseases, and find ourselves being criticized for that kind of work. There's something wrong. But that's how times have changed. And this recession, this incredible unemployment we're experiencing, the foreclosures, the financial markets frozen, the weakened stock market, they've all created this perfect storm. A perfect storm that's turning our profession upside down in too many places. And now so many who once had high regard for us, got to call it like it is. Take a look out in California at some of those publications. They're referring to you as gluttons. You know, we used to be part of the solution. They delivered the best service in the community. But now there are those who are beginning to view us as a significant part of the problem. We used to have that political support from all corners, from committed friends, but now many of our so-called friends are beginning to take aim at us too. Just take a look at New Jersey. Our friends there, now in lockstep with the state's new governor, ran on a platform that he's going to dismantle the firefighters' pension plans, and within a 3-day period passed legislation to begin capping and eliminating their retiree health care benefits, passed by a legislature, signed by that governor. No, the attack on our members' health care plans and retirement benefits is real. And with friends like that, who needs enemies? But the real question is, who can we trust? I don't mean just to paint some doom and gloom this morning, but this is a serious time, and it's going to take some serious thought. We've got some serious work to do. And this political landscape we find ourselves in is beginning to unravel. And even in the communities where there is no crisis, mayors and city managers are using this historic, uncertain time as an excuse. You know as well as I do that there are those out there that have been looking forward to cutting us for a long time. And now they have an excuse to cut staffing, to reduce companies and stations, to reduce the resources, to go after your pensions, to force us to make concessions. They didn't have the nerve to really stand up and do it to our face in normal times, but now they're using this economic crisis as a tool, as a weapon against us. This is what we're faced with. And this next year, I believe, is going to be even tougher than last year. So we have to work within this weak economic climate. We have to find a way to persevere and to succeed until what appears to be just the beginning of a recovery today hopefully begins to take hold and then start to filter back down to us. Keep in mind that in every downturn in our economy over the last 50 years, we tend to be about 10 to 12 months behind the curve. When the private sector is really feeling the pain, we find ourselves 10 or 12 months before we start feeling that pain. But at the same time, we're 10 or 12 months lag time when the recovery begins before we start experiencing the expansion. And while we wait for this recovery and fend off the attacks that are coming from all sides, from those who really don't give a damn about any of our efforts, I'm concerned that there are also members of our own firefighter family who are letting us down. This may not be popular here at FDIC. But I've walked through these exhibit halls. I've looked at the incredible tools and equipment that's now being manufactured. I am amazed and impressed, as any of you must be, by the new rigs that are now being offered to our profession. But I tell you what, I have a problem when too many decision makers are willing to purchase these resources, but think it's okay for those incredible rigs to roll out the bay doors with just 2 or 3 firefighters on them. I have a problem when a $1 million ladder built with 6 seats is running on incidents with 4 of those seats empty. That's wrong and it's unacceptable. And there isn't a piece of apparatus in the world worth $1 million to a community if it doesn't have the firefighters on it to conduct their work, to make those rescues. I've been to too many departments that will dispatch a dozen pieces of apparatus, millions and millions of dollars of equipment, just to try and get a minimum number of firefighters on the scene so that they can make a proper deployment for an initial attack. No offense, but In these sad circumstances, I view these rigs at times as nothing but big, shiny, million-dollar taxi cabs that run up on a scene and then are vacated just because the crews are trying to assemble. They're selling ground ladders out here on the trade show floor. But how many departments are there where we don't have enough firefighters to effectively throw them and climb them? They're selling all sorts of hose lines out there. But how many departments are running short or having trouble having enough crews to move those lines up to the fire floors? Look, the decision makers, whether they are elected officials or whether they wear the proud uniform of our business of blue, trimmed with gold, are doing the fire service a disservice if they are willing to put our crews in jeopardy when those trucks are running understaffed. I don't have to tell you this is a life and death business. Some people use those dramatic terms, but you know the truth. You're understated. You know what you're willing to do and what you do every day, and you don't like to call attention to it. But I have to tell you, with that incredible humility that you have, I take exception to anyone in our firefighter family who is willing to put firefighters in peril by letting a rig roll out the station when it isn't fully staffed. At least not without taking a stand. At least not without putting up a fight. Staffing cuts might save money. They also cost lives. Now, I know those in command here and beyond, as well as those of us in labor on this side of the house, I think we make it pretty clear. I think we're both trying to pursue the same goals on behalf of our crews. But I've got to ask those sometimes that have the power and have the decision-making, how can you willingly participate in cutting your crews, potentially placing them in jeopardy, without some attempt to take a strong principled stand? Just to save money? God, I hope not. And speaking of money, and how many media attacks do we see on the amount of money that our members are making in our ranks? But with all those salaries that they're willing to print on the front of these newspapers, how many times do they fail to report that in most cases those salaries are made up of overtime? Lots of overtime, because a city, a town, or a county won't hire additional personnel. They conveniently fail to inform the public that the government gets off a lot cheaper by loading our people up with overtime rather than pay the benefit and retirement costs of hiring additional firefighters. So we get it coming or going. You load up on the work, and then you get whacked for allegedly making too much. Then they turn around and are willing to feed our members to the wolves. They're willing to point out in Los Angeles who are the top wage earners in the city and filter in the firefighters in that top 20. Again, not telling the full story. And I can tell you one thing, this union, we've had enough of that crap. And we're going to mobilize, and we're fighting back. We're going to put our resources on the line. We're going to put our money on the line. We're going to put our troops on the line. And we're going to start getting our message across. And we're going to do it a lot more aggressively. We're going to go back to that public. And we're going to make sure that they understand what's at risk when the term brownout is occurring in their city, whose neighborhood's being exposed. We're going to make sure they understand what rifts and layoffs really translate into. What are we doing to our neighborhoods when stations are closing? But it's not only making it harder for you to do your jobs, but it's making it less safe for them, that community, for their families, putting their neighborhoods at risk. For those of you who are chief officers, and particularly those of you who are department chiefs, I know you have your bosses, believe me. And I know that you've got to report to them. And I know you've got to carry out many times a set of your own orders given to you that you don't particularly care for. I know you're faced with administering your departments with slashed resources. And I know that they're demanding you to continue to reduce your budgets. And I know that there's only so much that you can do. I know where the money in a typical budget lies. But I'd prefer that we find a way to work more together during these very trying times and maybe find ourselves working in conflict. I don't look naively at the daunting challenges and the seriousness of these efforts that we mutually face. And I do believe far more times that we really want to do the very same thing, or at least get to the same place. I can't believe that everyone in this room ultimately wants, whatever kind of department you come from, a well-resourced, a fully staffed, and a well-trained fire department. On these core issues, it shouldn't come down to command against union. I want to remind you, those on the outside of our firefighting family, those who want to really turn the clock back on all of us, they want to pit us against them. They want to pit chiefs against union officers. They're willing to pit grizzled veterans against recruits. And yes, they're willing to pit paid against volunteer. There's nothing the real enemy enjoys more than to see us in some level of internal turmoil, fighting among ourselves, fighting with each other. It lets them just simply stand on the sidelines and do nothing to ease the burden and the responsibility to resource our industry like it should be. Having said that, and meaning it, I also want to be clear that we are drawing a line in the sand. Enough is enough. We are prepared to battle for the future of our members. This union would like to do it in much more cooperation than in conflict. But we're going to be fighting for our members' rights. We're going to be fighting for their jobs and their safety. And if our troops don't have the staffing and support they need to do the job safely, then as far as I'm concerned, they're being used as nothing more than sacrificial lambs. I'm not willing to let our industry do to our members what the coal mining industry is in the process of doing to miners. I'm not willing to have our members killed because of bad economic, political, and command decisions. We would never stand for sending the women and men who wear the proud uniform of our country's military services, that uniform that so many of you have worn and many of you currently still wear today. We would never send them in harm's way and wouldn't stand for it if they were understaffed or under-resourced. And this IAFF is not going to stand for our domestic soldiers, all of you, the men and women of the fire service, to be sent into harm's way with anything less. This IAFF has been doing everything we can to address this ever-increasing staffing shortage. And we fought like hell with many of you to change the SAFER rules as just one effort so that we can tap the reserve of federal funding to get laid off firefighters back on the jobs, to be able to start filling those positions that have been ripped by attrition. We all worked to get that $210 million appropriated in 2009. We supported a president who, for the first time in the program's history, put in his budget money for that program, $420 million for 2010, and now has proposed another $335 million for next year. That's almost $1 billion. It's a lot of money. And it's enough for all of us, if you will, to get our fair share. Now, we've had some difficulties with that program, and some of you know that. And the truth is, we had some federal career employees who, quite frankly, didn't give a crap about the dilemma that we're in out in the field. They made the decision that regardless of what Congress said to do, regardless of what the Secretary said to do, regardless of what the new guidelines said should take place. They just felt that the way they had been doing it was a better way to do it, and that's the way they were going to do it. Well, so we had a little meeting. We had a little sit-down with senior DHS and female officials 2 weeks ago. And I can tell you that after this first round of grants, all of which deserved, but some out of priority, we're going to get that squared away. That grant money is now going to start flowing. It's going to start flowing to the neediest departments first. By the time that we really left there, I think they really have seen the light. But we got to see. Proof in the pudding's always in the eating, so I want to see that second round of grants. But that is supposed to go to the hardest hit first. Bring those laid off who've lost their jobs and put them back on the job. And then it's supposed to fill those positions that have been lost over these last 2 years. That's the priority of the program right now for the next 2 years. But it's one thing to battle with some of the federal bureaucracy that we all tend to face at times. It's another thing that we have to battle some of our own. Some of those that want to sit at peer review tables and game the system, trying to see how they might be able to grade the grant application so that the prioritization is ignored, selfishly misusing the system just to advance their own agenda over the core current mission of that program right now, and that is to create jobs and bring people back to work. But even with these frustrations, now after months of working with Congress, we are beginning to see some relief. That first $55 million hit 3 weeks ago. 550 jobs is what it's creating. Jobs for firefighters in Flint and St. Bernard Parish and Cincinnati. That money is now going for jobs in Springfield, Missouri, Massachusetts, and Anderson, Indiana. No, 49 communities in this first round, 49 departments and counting, have received some help, and more help is on the way. So we're going to continue to do everything we can to see that firefighters get back to work and to fill those spots that have been lost. But in addition to our federal efforts, our state and local elected officials need to know that we are dead serious and prepared to take them on. We are not going to tolerate departments that continue to fight fires with 2 and 3 on a rig. We may not win, but I'll tell you what we've got a pretty good reputation for, and that is we're willing to take them on. We're willing to make sure that they know that we're not going to have this great new apparatus sitting in bay doors with anything less than adequately staffed crews. Anything less is unacceptable. We can't let those who view us as a budgetary burden use this crisis to simply gut our ranks, failing and unwilling to protect the communities that you protect. I know how bad it is out there. I spend 200 days a year on the road. I'm in every corner of the United States and Canada, 2 great countries. I know what's going on in this economy. But even in the worst of times, government must not ignore one of its fundamental responsibilities. Government is there essentially to do and take care of the people, and one of those responsibilities is to protect its citizens and to protect its firefighters and to deliver our service. And we won't tolerate public officials compromising on our members' safety. And we're prepared to hold them accountable. And we're prepared to continue to enter that political arena. And we're prepared to take them on, Democrat, Republican, or Independent. And we're prepared to win, but we're also prepared to lose. But more importantly, they'll know that we've been in the game. They'll know that they've been in a fight. We won't tolerate sectors in our own firefighting community to squabble about who's going to get more while compromising on our members' safety. And we won't tolerate Washington bureaucrats who ignore the desperate need of departments, large and small, urban and rural, to force them to operate with too few on their crews. Those who have chosen to attack us using the guise of this dark economic time as their tool need to know it is no longer open season on you. We won't let them play games with your lives. And we need to stick together. And we truly need to fight together, or we are doomed to failure, and we're going to die together. The choice is all of ours. And I commit to you, this IAFF chooses to work with all of you and to put the power of our 300,000 members, 3,200 locals, 57 state and provincial councils, we're willing to put that on the front line. We'll chip our share in. I just hope that you'll choose to stand with us. Because I believe, sisters, brothers, that if we really stick together, if we are prepared to fight together, those on the outside of our profession who want to cut us, who want to roll that clock back, they'll have no chance. So let's step forward on behalf of all of those that wear the proud uniform of our business. And I'll be proud to stand with you in that battle. God bless you, and God bless every firefighter and soldier on the front lines everywhere. Thank you.
Don't run off.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
The fire service is blessed to have the General President. IFD is blessed that he agrees to come back and visit with us every year. I know you're racing off to your classes, but I want to see that you all see he gets our squadron coin. It's 1 of 500, and without the IAFF and without you, we couldn't be here.
Thanks, Bobby.
God bless
you. Have it. Thank you. Be safe. Travel safe.
Hey, listen, I know you got to run to your classes, but please remember to fill out your evaluations. A couple of things happening tonight. We've got Norman and Bruno up here at 5 o'clock. Please sign up for the fun run. I know you all want to run with us. We're trying to get 500 to run. We're just shy, so get to the fun run table. Remember the Fools Bash tonight. I don't have to remind you about that. Duh. How many fools in the audience? Hurrah! All right. God bless you all. Let's have a great conference.